Hey, welcome to video 2 of this 4-part series. Today we're looking at the account screen settings in Toolkit for YNAB. Alright, so today I'm using Firefox for my demonstration. That's the browser that I'm using. Like I said, it works in Firefox. The Toolkit works in Firefox and it works in Google Chrome, but not Safari. So I'm using Firefox as my browser, and the Toolkit, once it's installed, it shows up in your toolbar as this little green plus icon over here. If you hover over it, it says Toolkit for YNAB. So if we click on that, it opens up this dialog box, and from there we open the settings. And today, as I said, we're working in all the settings that affect the accounts screen. So here we go. Now, really quickly, we'll run through how to implement these changes. You turn on a setting that you wish to turn on. Lower down, we get, instead of on-off options, we get drop-down options where we can refine or choose between several options for that setting. Once you have decided on a setting that you want to turn on or turn off, you do that and then you save. So that saves that setting, that new setting, in the toolkit. Then in order to see that change take effect in your budget, you have to come into your budget screen and then click on the refresh icon. And once you've refreshed your budget, then whatever change you made in the toolkit is now being implemented in your budget. Okay, let's get started, shall we? We're going to look at each option. I'm going to show you what it looks like without the setting turned on, and then we'll look at it again with the after it's been turned on, what the implementation of that setting does to the YNAB screen. And we're just going to start at the top and work our way to the bottom. Okay, so the first setting that we're looking at is add a toggle splits button to the account toolbar. And let's look first at what YNAB looks like without that setting turned on. So split transactions are transactions we spent, you made one purchase, but you're splitting it among 2 or more categories. And YNAB recently, just really recently, updated their software so that they added this little caret next to a split transaction. So on each individual split, you can open the caret to see the individual line items, or you can close it to save space. And I have multiple splits here, and you can see that on each one of these, I have a caret. But in the toolkit, if we turn on this particular setting, it adds a new layer of functionality to the splits. You still have the YNAB caret next to individual splits. So I can open and close each one of these. But what the toolkit did is it added this toggle button at the top. And now if you click on that, you can quickly open or close all of your splits at once. So you can still control them individually, but this master button with the toolkit lets you open or close all of your splits at once. The next setting is Add Auto Distribute button to split transactions. So let's look first at the behavior of YNAB by default. So if we come in here and we create a single line, a single category transaction, we get 3 buttons. We get save, we get cancel, save and add another. If we create a split transaction, we get the same 3 buttons. We get cancel, save, and add another. Now if I try to create a transaction in here that's split, and let's say I'm going to spend some money on groceries, and then I'm going to spend some money on clothing. And now YNAB tells me that I have a remainder of $5 here. And if I don't assign those $5, if I tell YNAB right now to save it, YNAB tells me, it gives me this error message. It says, my math is bad, I have to go back and fix it before I can proceed. So in the case of, if you have a whole bunch of transactions and they're not even amounts and you're just guessing at the amount, or if you're like me and you pay sales tax on your items, so you're just adding up the purchase price of all of the items that you bought, you end up with a remainder here. It's really common to end up with a remainder. And YNAB, in the program itself now, they make you do the math to the penny. So let's run through those same scenarios now with the toolkit turned on. So a single category transaction gives you 3 buttons: cancel, save, save, and add another. But if we create a split transaction, we get this 4th button. It says auto distribute. So we get cancel, auto distribute, save, and add another. And if we create that same transaction where we split between groceries and clothing, now we still get this message that we have a remainder of $5. But if we click on auto distribute, this new button, what it does is it distributes that remainder for us. It has changed my $50 to $51.72, and it's changed my $95 to $98.28. So what it did, it didn't take the remainder and divide it in half because I had 2 transactions. It took that remainder and it divided it proportionately based on how much I had assigned to each category. And now, if I click on save, now it does say that there's still a $5 remainder down there. I didn't program it. I don't think I would have left the $5 remainder down there, but that's what the toolkit developers have done. But now I can save this because the remainder has been distributed here. If I click on this save, now it goes through. The next setting is add a check number column. And you can see by default that YNAB has in their column headers, right, there's no column here for a check number. When they moved from YNAB 4 into the web-based version of the software, they dropped the check number column. So if we turn this on and do a quick refresh, now we have a check number column. We have this column back. Now it doesn't put it where we expect it to see over here in front of payee, but at least it's available now. Okay, and the next setting is add split transaction keyboard shortcut. And the interesting thing about this particular setting is that YNAB, in just less than the last week, they did a refresh on the software, and they added this function in to their own software. So that really renders the toolkit setting redundant. But there's a mild change. It's really slight. I'm going to show you the difference between the way that YNAB implemented it and the way that the toolkit had implemented it. So in this case, let's create a split transaction. And what happens is if we start typing in split now in YNAB, they pop up this option to create a split category. Now, until their recent update, they thought that if you started typing in split, that you wanted to create a new category called split. Kind of annoying, right? I mean, if we start typing in a new word here that YNAB doesn't recognize, it asks us if we want to create this new category. And until recently, if you started typing in split, YNAB would ask you if you wanted to create a new category called split, which of course is not what we're trying to do. And then what you would have to do is then move your cursor down here and create and click on this split category button. But like I said, with this new refresh, now YNAB has this functionality built in. You start typing split, it says, oh, maybe you want to create a split transaction, so it pops this option up, and now you can just hit the return key, and boom, you're ready to enter a split transaction. So that's the way that YNAB implemented this feature. But let's look really quick at what the toolkit, the way that they had designed it. So with the toolkit turned on, if we come in here and start typing split, it does pop up knowing that we want to create a split transaction, so with multiple categories. But here it has this extra text that says actions split multiple categories. So like I said, tiny detail in how it was implemented, but it's basically rendered redundant by YNAB adding this functionality into their core software. Okay, moving on. So the previous setting is rendered redundant, and this setting, though, doesn't work for me. So it sounds cool, because what they say is that when you're entering split transactions, each additional split will be auto-filled with the current remaining amount. That could be a really cool feature, but for me, it doesn't work. So I ran through the demo, several demos now of how you do split transactions, so I'm not going to go through that again. I'm just going to turn this setting on and move forward. Okay, so I've turned this setting on. Let's create a split transaction. So based on the description of this setting, this option in the toolkit, where it says that each additional split will be auto-filled with the current remaining amount, I know what I would expect. And that's not what happens. In fact, I just don't see any difference in behavior with this setting turned on or with it turned off. Now let's say we're going to spend money on groceries again. So our total transaction is $150, but this first split for groceries is just going to be $50. Now my point is that according to the description, the software toolkit should have then entered the remainder in the next line, right? That's what it says it's going to do, so that I don't have to type the amount. The remainder would be automatically entered in the next transaction line. Well, that didn't happen, but it opened with 2 transaction lines. Let's see if we give it a third transaction line. So here, let's spend another $50 on clothing. And again, though, nothing is happening here with this remainder. It's not auto-filling anywhere. And you can see if I click on save, this automatically entering the remainder is not happening. So this particular setting in the toolkit, this auto adjust split transactions, it doesn't work for me. If it works for you, I hope that you'll hit me up in the comments or send me an email, because this one confuses me. Okay, moving on. The next setting is automatically mark transactions as cleared. So let me demonstrate what that looks like without it turned on. What it's talking about is automatically mark transactions as cleared when you enter it manually. So that's important to know. So I'm going to enter a transaction here manually. I'm going to spend some money on groceries. I'm going to spend $15 on groceries. Now, in this case, I'm entering it manually, but I don't have the setting turned on yet, right? So this is the default YNAB behavior. So if I click on enter to enter that transaction, here it is. Here's my $15 grocery transaction, and it's not cleared. But as soon as I turn that setting on in the toolkit, and now I'm going to come in here and create another grocery transaction, and this time I'm going to spend $10, and when I click save, that transaction has already been marked as cleared. Let's move on to the next setting, which is change behavior of enter key when adding transactions. And this one is interesting. So when we enter a transaction here, and we're going to spend $25 on clothes. Now, I've got this transaction entered, and if I hit the return key, what happens is it enters this transaction. My clothing spending right here is $25. It added it right here, but it then automatically assumed that I would have another transaction to enter. So if I don't, I have to click on cancel. But if we turn this setting on in the toolkit and come back in here and create another transaction, and I'm going to buy more clothing, And this time I'm going to spend $30. Now, when I hit the return key, because this transaction, the details are filled out, it's done. It just hit it saved it, and it didn't assume that I wanted to add another. So really, what the setting in the toolkit is, it is changing the behavior of the return key, the enter key, depending on whether you're a Mac user or a PC user, that return or enter key it's changing the behavior of that. The default is save and add another. And with the setting on in the toolkit, the behavior of the enter return key is simply save. Okay, the next setting is clear selection. And what this does is it adds a function to the drop-down edit box. So if we come in here and we select a few transactions, for whatever reason, we select multiple transactions. And then if we come up here into the edit menu, now to these, right, these are options that of operations we can perform on the selected transaction. So we can mark them all as cleared or mark them all as uncleared. We can choose to recategorize the selected transactions, or we can move those selected transactions to a different account, or we could delete them. Right? There's a purpose, a reason why we selected these transactions, and those are the things that we can do to those transactions. But now let's turn that setting on and see the change in behavior. Okay, so if we come in here and we select a series of transactions again, and now we open this edit menu, we get a new option up here, right? The toolkit is adding this new option that lets us clear the selection. So it lets us clear that list of selected transactions. The next setting is easy transaction approval. And what this does is it just makes it easier and faster to approve a list of transactions in YNAB. So let's look at the default version, the default behavior first. If I want to approve this transaction in the default YNAB without the toolkit, then I can click on it. It brings up this, this quick menu to approve this transaction. So on any one of these, I can do a left click and quickly approve or unmatch or reject for whatever reason. But now if I select all three of these and then I do a left click, it only affects that single transaction that I clicked on. So now if I click to approve this transaction, see, it only approved the one transaction that I did a left click on, not all of the transactions that I selected. But if we turn this setting on in the toolkit, so what the setting does is it gives us an even quicker way to approve transactions. Now I've selected this one transaction because I want to show you how it works on a single transaction or multiple transactions. Now, I want to quick approve this. There are three different things I can do to approve this transaction. I can click on the A key. I can hit the return or enter key. Or now I can do a right click and it approves the transaction. But now, as they say in the infomercials, but wait, it gets better. Let's select multiple transactions that we want to approve all at once. Now, if I hit the A key, it clears all of the transactions. If I hit the return or enter key, it clears and approves all of those, not clears, sorry, keep my terminology clean. It approves all of those transactions in a single click. And to show you the third key option, I can do a right click. All three transactions are selected. I can do a right click on one transaction and they are quickly and instantly all approved. Okay, so moving on, let's look at the next setting, which is edit multiple flags at once. So looking first at the default behavior, we can come in here and create and select multiple items. And then if we click on a flag and change color, it changes the color of just that one flag. So here in the inline editing, we can only edit one flag at a time. If we come up into this edit menu, there's no option up here that has anything to do with the flag. So we can't edit the flags through this edit menu. But let's turn this setting on in the toolkit. And now if we come in here and we select multiple transactions, and then inline again in the transaction list, if we click on the color for this flag, it affects just this one flag. So it's not changing the inline editing of flags, but what it does change is it gives you some flag controls up here in the edit menu. So now in here, we have selected multiple transactions, and coming into the edit menu, now I can set the flags and I can set them all to yellow. Or I can come in and I can remove all the flags. So the toolkit allows the option, it adds the option to edit multiple flags, not in line, but up here in this edit menu. And the next setting is emphasize outflows. So we'll look at that really quick. Let's look at an example of a checking account. We have our outflow column here, and the outflow numbers look exactly the same as the inflow numbers. One is just you got the column, and the column header says outflows, and then you have a column with column header for inflows, and the formatting of the numbers is exactly the same. And if we look at a credit card account, we have the same thing. We have an outflow column, an inflow column, and the formatting of these numbers is exactly the same, whether it's an inflow or an outflow. But if we turn on this emphasize outflows option, now clearly the outflows are emphasized. They are formatted differently. And this is standard accounting style formatting with any outflow is in red and it is encased in parentheses. So here, this is again the credit card account, and this is the checking account. This next setting is larger clickable area for icons, and you'll have to look really carefully in order to see the difference that the toolkit changing this setting, the effect of this setting in YNAB. It's hard to see, is what I'm trying to say. It's a very subtle difference. Okay, and what they're talking about is not all icons. They're talking about actually just this cleared icon way over here on the right. So in this case, by default, with the toolkit setting not turned on, you have these cleared icons and they line up perfectly with the column header. And so now if we turn this setting on in the toolkit, you'll see that the actual cleared icons are offset from where that icon is in the column header. So it has moved those cleared icons in the register over imperceptibly, a tiny amount. And it's the same here in the credit card account. I'm not sure why that seems like even a smaller shift over to the right to me. It could be because this account has a series of locks, so there could be somehow a larger padding around the reconciled lock icon. I'm not sure. Anyway, my point is that that's what this setting does in the toolkit, is it shifts that right-hand column of icons over just a tad to the right. So circling back to a setting that does have an big impact that we can see and we don't have to look closely, the next setting is set custom flag names with tooltips. Now, there's a description here. You can see it's longer because they have a caveat in here. This setting is really cool. It's pretty interesting, but it does not transfer beyond your browser. So if you use two different computers, let's say you do some YNABing at home, and then on your lunch break, you do a little YNABing at the office. So you log in. So that using a different computer, then any setting that you change here on your computer, your browser at home, you will not see it work. If you set this setting up in this browser in, let's say, Firefox, and then you use it in Google Chrome, even with the toolkit turned on and this setting turned on, you will not see the changes that you make in Firefox. If you clean your cookies, if you come in and make all these changes in Firefox, and then at the end of the week you clear out your cookies, all of these changes will be gone. So it's cool, but it doesn't, it's ephemeral. It does not last beyond what your browser on this computer memorizes. So if all of that caveat was confusing, just ignore it. And let me show you, come with me, let me show you what this toolkit setting does. Okay, so we looked at the flags, and we see here by default that we can have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, or purple. And that's it. You can't do anything else with the flags. They're just colors. If we turn this setting on, however, and we come in here and refresh our browser, now if we come in here and click on a flag, our flags have names. So yes, I have done this in my practice runs. I know you think this looks raw, but I actually did practice this. And so I have some names set up. So instead of red, my red flag is now called urgent. And instead of orange, my orange flag is now called warning. And instead of green, the green flag is Elizabeth. And instead of blue, the blue flag is Fang. Yeah, that's my husband. So it also, though, creates this tooltip. So if we come in here and tag or flag Qdoba with my flag, my green flag, and then I hover over this green flag, if I forget what green is supposed to signify, this tooltip reminds me that, oh yes, the green flag means that the purchase was mine. Or if I tag it as warning and I hover over the orange flag, it reminds me that I named orange as warning. So it's a pretty cool setting, but don't forget, you can't expect it to transfer from computer to computer or browser to browser or withstand you clearing the cookies out of your browser history. Okay, moving on. Our next option is show available category balance on hover. And let's look at what that looks like in YNAB without the toolkit. If I come in here and hover over a transaction, then the tooltip that pops up when I hover just says true expenses clothing. So it repeats exactly what the category name is, right? The category name is true expenses clothing. The hover tooltip says true expenses clothing. But let's turn this setting on and see what happens. And now when we hover over true expenses clothing, the tooltip pops up and says what the balance is of that category. So here we get true expenses clothing balance, yada yada, $130.74. So that now is pretty cool. I can see from a quick glance by hovering over this that my dining out balance is a negative $8.69. Now if I flip over to the budget screen, I can confirm that my dining out balance over here is has this warning of $8.69. I've overspent $8.69 in the dining out. And it works in all the registers. So I was in the credit card register, and now I'm in the checking account register. And if I find another category here, so here's true expenses gifts, balance pops up with the available balance in gifts, which says I have a positive balance of $385.37. And if we come back into the budget, we can see in gifts, my bubble says that I have 385.37 left in gifts. And moving on, our next setting is show menu when right-clicking on transaction. So let's look at that one, what that looks like without the setting turned on. So if we do a right-click when we're in the budget screen, hovering over a transaction, a right-click brings up the system or the browser menu, just as it does anytime you're in a browser window and you do a right-click. It brings up the system or browser menu anytime that you click in anytime you do a right-click on the screen of your browser. But now if we turn this setting on in the toolkit, and we come over here over a transaction, and now we do a right-click, what pops up is the edit menu, right? The YNAB edit menu, not the browser edit menu, but the YNAB edit menu. So the same one that you would access if you came up here into this, this edit option in the navigation toolbar. So a simple right-click now, instead of opening the browser menu, opens the YNAB menu. And the next setting is show spare change. So let's look at, there's a functionality I need to show you in YNAB to show you then what spare change does differently. So if we come in here and we look at multiple transactions, as we select multiple transactions, YNAB does a count of these transactions, or of our selections. So it tells me that I selected 5 transactions for a total of $110. And what does it have to do with spare change? Well, I didn't design Toolkit. I had nothing to do with choosing what features might be needed or why they would be needed, why would you build that? So I don't know why you would build that, but I want to show you the way it works. So now I have selected the same 5 transactions. It tells me that I've selected 5 for a total of $110, but now I didn't choose very good transactions, did I? All right, so let me choose some different transactions here. I need some transactions with that are not even. Well, that one's not even either. All right, here we go. Let's select some transactions with that don't end in 00. And here we get the selected total. I selected 4. It tells me how much I selected, and it tells me the spare change. So the way that the Toolkit developers describe this setting is that imagine if you paid for all your purchases in whole dollars. This shows a total of the spare change you would accumulate for selected outflow transactions. So there you have it, folks. For those selected outflow transactions that didn't end in round numbers, if I had paid in round numbers, then the spare change would be $1.12. Don't ask me to explain what this is what value this is supposed to bring into your life or your budgeting, because I don't understand. I'm just showing you what it does, not why it does it or why you would want it. So moving on, we come to a setting that does make sense to me. This is striped transaction rows. And by default in YNAB, we have just a plain white background with thin lines between each transaction, whether we're looking in the checking account or the credit card register. But if we turn this setting on, now we have striped rows. And it's just it's just simple. Every single row is different from the one above or below it. So there's no extra special logic built in here that deals with split transactions. So it doesn't make all of this particular split transaction a solid color indicating that this one belongs together. So it doesn't have any special programmatic logic behind it. So it just, every other row is white and every other row is gray, whether you are looking at a split transaction or not. All right, and now we're at our last on-off setting in the accounts screen setting options in Toolkit for YNAB. And this one says that it swaps the cleared and flagged columns. So let's look at, here we have our flagged column and here we have our cleared column. So cleared is all the way to the right and flagged is nearly to the left of the account register view. And I'm guessing that if we implement this toolkit setting, it will swap those columns. And there we go. We have cleared now over on the left and we have flags way over on the right. So that's the end of the simple on-off settings. And now we get to this, to the bottom section that has where the setting has drop-down boxes. So it has multiple selections. It has subtleties to it maybe. And the first one of these is choosing the first day of the week in the calendar. So by default, if we look at the YNAB calendar, the week always starts with Sunday and runs Sunday to Saturday. But in case you want to change that, now the toolkit gives you the option to change it to any day of the week as the starting day of the week. So for this example, let's set the first day of the week to Wednesday. So now if we look at a calendar again, with this setting turned on, our week now starts with Wednesday. And as long as we leave the setting on in the toolkit, our week will always run from Wednesday to Tuesday. Okay, so this particular setting here, you can just pick any day of the week. I'm not going to run through every single day of the week because it works exactly the same. If I chose Monday, then the week would run from Monday to Sunday, leaving the weekends at the far right of the calendar. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So that means that we move on to the next setting, which covers the height of the rows in the account register. So if you've already seen my first video where I looked at the general settings in the toolkit, this option is going to look really familiar to you because we have three options. In addition to default, we have compact and slim. So just to remind our eyes what that looks like, this is the default height of the transaction rows in the accounts. We get the credit card and the checking account register. Now let's look at that same screen with the compact setting turned on. So you can see that this space, they have greatly reduced the amount of space between the transaction lines in the register, in the account register. And here we get the slim view. So that is quite compact. And once again, for good measure, here it is in the default view. Okay, so we're getting close now. We've got 3 more to go. The next one is the reconciled text color. And here there are 5 options or 4 options in addition to default. So let's look at reconciled transactions really quickly. So in my credit card view, I have reconciled this account. And so I have 3 transactions here that have been reconciled. And you can tell that they've been reconciled because the icon to the right shows a little green lock as opposed to a little green circle, which means that the transaction is cleared, or a little gray circle, which means that the transaction has not been cleared. And this setting, what this is going to do is give us 4 additional options as to how to format how we want to see our reconciled transactions. So the first option is green. And this screen shows you what our reconciled transactions look like in green. The next option is light gray. And a quick refresh shows us our reconciled transactions in light gray. So it really makes it visually different. We can see immediately which transactions have been reconciled and which ones haven't. Our next option is dark gray, and that font is a little easier for me to see, but it's still a significant visual difference between the reconciled transactions and the unreconciled transactions. And the last option is dark gray with a green background. And there you have it. There is dark gray with a green background formatted for our 3 reconciled transactions in this case. So now all of your reconciled transactions, if you have, as time goes on, you have more and more reconciled transactions, and they would all be formatted this same way. Up next is the show running balance setting. And here we have 2 additional options. In addition to default, which is off, we can show the running balance with the style on any negative number. It's styled red, or to show the running balance but not style the negative numbers. So by default, let's look at this. We have no running balance, right? So there's no running balance, and because there's no running balance, there is no styling to that running balance because it doesn't exist. So we simply have our outflow and our inflow columns in each account. So if we turn on our first setting option, which is on style any negative running balance is red, this is what we see. We have our, because this is a credit card account, so the balance is almost always red, unless for some reason I pay too much on my credit card or I paid a 0, I'm going to have a negative running balance. So the running balance shows and all the negatives are styled in red. And here's the view of my checking account, which hopefully never has a negative balance. So there is no styling in red, but I do have a running balance. And the second option for that setting is on do not style negative running balances. So it simply turns on the running balance, but it doesn't format negative and positive balances differently. And so here we go. This is the checking account with a running balance not styled, and we have the credit card with a running balance that's not styled. And now we come to our last option in the accounts screen setting options in Toolkit for YNAB. And that setting option is toggle scheduled and reconciled transaction buttons. So let's look one last time at what this looks like by default. So it's talking about the reconciled and scheduled transactions. And here, if we look at YNAB default view, you can see that I can pop open or close this list of scheduled transactions. And it styles the scheduled transaction differently. That's the default YNAB behavior. And then I have, in this account, I don't have any scheduled transactions, but I have reconciled transactions. Now, by default, what YNAB does is it lets you filter by reconciled or scheduled transactions up here in this drop-down filter option. So I can come in here and I can, in this account, tell it to not show scheduled or reconciled transactions. And if I click OK, then it hides my scheduled transactions, which basically all it's doing is collapsing that. So it doesn't get rid of this text up here. And then I would have to do the same thing in this account, go into filter, tell it not to show me reconciled or scheduled transactions. And now my reconciled transactions are hidden. In order to see them, I can go back up into filter, or I can click on show all. But let's turn this setting on. So the toolkit gives us 2 different options. We can turn this setting on and show the icons, or we can turn it on and show icons and text labels. So let's look at just the icons first. Okay, so right up here next to the filter that I showed you just a second ago, now we have two new icons. And these are just quick filters. If I toggle the reconciled transactions, I can quickly toggle on and off those hide or unhide my reconciled transactions in this account. And in my checking account here, where I have a scheduled transaction, I can quickly toggle on and off that scheduled transactions, or if I had a list of scheduled transactions, all of them. So this is the icon view, just the little tiny icon indicating scheduled and reconciled. And the other option lets us show the icon and the text label. And that does exactly what you would expect it to do. Now you see the icon and the text label right up here next to this filter button. So it just gives you this quick toggle ability to hide or unhide your scheduled and reconciled transactions. And there we go. We have just run through all of the account screen setting options in Toolkit for YNAB. I'm so glad you joined me today. I have a couple of quick, maybe favors to ask. One, leave a comment. I love comments. I love knowing that there's somebody out there getting something out of the videos. Number two, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel so that you have access to the new videos as I upload them. And number three, there's a bell icon that if you click on that, you actually be notified when I upload and make available new videos. So until we meet again, Elizabeth out.